I think
what percentage of systems haven't been improved to the level that they're supposed to be out in Mattocket?
I'm sorry?
I think what Chris, if I may, I think what you're referring to is in our inspections. So we have this process.
We have an inspections process that's ongoing.
And we've identified failed systems, and we've encouraged those systems, or mandated those systems to correct themselves.
And I'll be the first person to tell you that the inspection period for Mattocket ended December 14th. For one zone, it'll end in June for the next zone. However, we are going to run a little over with inspections because we only have 2 inspections companies that are actually out there inspecting on a routine basis. And we have to work with them in a time frame. We ran into the same problem in the Nantucket Harbor Watershed Protection District and ran a year over. We may do that in Mattocket, but we are not mandating right now, nor have we mandated that individuals with technically failed systems get their systems repaired. We have mandated people who have failed systems to have them repaired, as we would do island-wide. There's been no special treatment or special orders for the people in Mattocket at this point. We have simply logged it in as a technically failed system.
So the only thing we've done in Mattocket is inspect. There's been no program there that you're sort of thinking we're ending something and starting another. We've inspected systems, and now we're actually talking about a program out there in terms of how we're going to deal with the total maximum daily load. So again, it's not, you may be involved with the inspection process, but that's not one thing different than the other. The inspections are just going to be ongoing. And what Richard's saying here is that, should your system be failed, clearly you'd have to fix it. Technical failure is your proximity to the groundwater, and we're not going there yet, but we have to. So we're looking at ways of making that an easier transition for the homeowner.
All right. Well,
wait, just can I try it another way? Because I'm trying to see if I get your thought here, and it reminds me a little bit of what we did in Monomoy. And in Monomoy, clearly one option was to sewer the area, but because we weren't totally sure that sewering would accomplish our objective, we hired some folks to do a model, and we got whatever we got. Here in Mattocket, would it be helpful if we had, for example, a model that said every failed system or every system close to groundwater, put in an alternative system, okay? That doesn't take nitrogen to 0, but it takes it halfway down, or whatever the number is on average. If we did that, combined with, let's say, the fertilizer implementation strategy, or an outright ban in Mattocket, would that modeling get us close to meeting the TMDL? Or is it clear we have to go all the way to sewering to get the answer? Is that another way? Because if you stayed with a program, you'd get closer to everybody putting in an alternative system.
And we won't know until people have repaired their systems enough to what change, what impact that makes.
However, exactly, Chris. However, we can model it. We don't know until we go through it.
However, we will have a substantial indication once we run a few of the model runs associated with the Estuaries Program and SMAST, and that is on the agenda for the Board of Health and the Marine Department to run these programs. We will look at multiple concepts, sewering the entire area of Mattocket, using alternative design technologies for percentages in areas. We're going to be looking at a number of different routes. We simply do not want to throw darts at a dartboard. The Estuaries Program and its modeling will answer many of these questions, but they are still to come.
Just to add to that, too, we talked last night about Nantucket Harbor. There were these models, which are scenarios that were run, and it looks at solutions to reduce nitrogen loading. The Mattocket, Massachusetts Estuaries project that was done is completely different than Nantucket Harbor. Nantucket Harbor showed, and you look at the locally controllable things. What are the nitrogen loading things that you can control locally, like fertilizer or stormwater runoff or septic? In Nantucket Harbor, the most controllable, the ones that are going to reduce the loading the most, is stormwater runoff, fertilizers. In Mattocket, it's completely different. Mattocket shows that the highest contribution of nitrogen in Mattocket is coming from septic systems. These reports are on the town's website under the wastewater action plan.
So I looked at that last
And
night.
if you go through, I mean, it's a lot of technical stuff, but if you go through and find the graphics, the figures, and there's a figure, it's a pie chart.
Yep, I saw that.
And it shows you that septic systems are going to be the way to reduce the nitrogen. And again, it's just nitrogen. It's not looking at the other pollutants, the density of systems. Even a properly operating Title V system in Mattocket is discharging nitrogen to the ground. It doesn't have to be a failed system. I can't remember because I didn't bring the Mattocket specific information with me, but the estuaries report did like what I would call some sort of model to show what are the controllable areas. The landfill was another area. Wasn't a lot of nitrogen coming from the landfill, but there is nitrogen
I
coming.
think it was about 27%.
And you've been mining that each year, so as you continue to mine it, that reduces that. So
Maybe, but it's not lined yet, right?
No,
And it wasn't, isn't that part of the contract they have to line the dome?
well, that's what they're working on. One of the things we could do is we could speed up the mining process.
Right, I don't think we're going to line. The idea is to get rid of the mountain totally. So there's theoretically no more to leach. Whatever's in the ground's going to continue going. But once the mountain's gone, that portion of it, everything else out there that stays there at the moment is going into a lined cell.
Right.
So we're not adding anything at the dump right now unless it's lined.
So, Chris, there's going to be multiple solutions, and I
Right.
think the conversation is starting today on the finance end and the implementation side. But as far as the Board of Selectmen, there'll be conversations surrounding multiples, and there'll be modeling done to sort of see what the effects might be with respect to that. We learned a lot doing that with the harbor and Monomoy, for instance. We heard about that last night. So basically, being on the creek, I assume you've got a different issue with respect to your proximity to the groundwater than some in Mattocket. And so, you're going to be a little bit more sensitive to what those solutions are. But that's what we're doing
And
today.
at the same time, of course, we care about the quality of that
Right.
for the shellfish and
Exactly right.
everything.
And the ponds.
It's unfortunate that we don't have the drainage with the, when it opened up, we had a lot cleaner water.
Right.
But
We're probably not going to go down the road of discussing
I
that
know.
today, though.
Well, thank
That's
you
all
very
right.
much.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone else with a comment? All right. More questions? So we've started today. Are we going to look at this in a public hearing next, Richard? Is that the next step, or?
Yes, we'll refine the document. It'll come back before the board as a public hearing.
Okay, great. So be on the lookout. And the Board of Selectmen will continue to take our steps, Rick, right, with respect to the solution out there.
Yeah, we need to still get the CWMP underway and get the committee we just talked about, Patty, and
Yep.
keep moving. So.
Okay, all right. So if there's no more on that item, we'll move to the next, but I thank everyone here from Mattocket for coming in today, and we'll continue the conversation. The next is a good issue for all of you as well. It's a presentation from the Fertilizer Committee, proposed Board of Health regulations for the use of fertilizers on Nantucket. Before we get started, I want to say a big thank you to this group. They've met for a long time, put a lot of energy and work into this document that we now have before us for consideration. And ultimately, what we're learning is that, the best practices, as they're applied and as we encourage both our professionals and also our homeowners to use, will take us a long way down the road towards water quality and protecting water quality. So is there someone today? Louise, are you going to be? There you are. Sorry, Lee. Go ahead and begin if you would.
We're going to pull up some slides, but while we do that, to the respective chairs, trying to get this so everybody can hear me, to the respective chairs, members of the boards, and colleagues, fellow Nantucketers, I'm Lee Saperstein, and I'm operating as chair of the Article 68 work group. And I need, so this is, in terms of layout, a brief report of 14 slides, including this title slide, and then what we hope is an interactive discussion among members of the work group and members of the boards and any questions from the community. A moment ago, one of my colleagues asked me if I was nervous about the presentation. I said, no, not really. But I am in one respect. I don't want to leave anybody out who has contributed. And the listing here is the official roster, many of whom are here. Mark Lucas, Mike Miserelli, Ernie Steinauer, Cormac Collier, Wendy McCrae, Caroline Ellis, Peter Boyce, not to forget Richard Ray, and leaving just momentarily till now, Lucinda Young, who's the glue that has held us together. She's sitting right there. So we're clustered here, except for Richard. Oh, I apologize. One of the great things that has happened to us is the amount of support that we got, and not on the list, but for you to recognize, we had reviewers give of their time, which we know for other entities they charge heavily, from the universities of Connecticut, Cornell, Massachusetts, from commercial outfits like Pace Turf, Bartlett Tree Experts, from members of the community who came and talked to us about their concerns for shellfish. Our ex officio members, Richard Ray and Dave Franzuto, gave us some very extensive talks about what the issues were. Many of the issues that we're dealing with were dealt with in the last item because it has to do with the quality of water and what the benefits of those waters are for us, for recreation, for drinking, for use as disposal, and of course for shellfish. Now, the charge to the committee was written after the 2010 annual town meeting, which passed Article 68. Article 68 contains some very specific language. It was amended to say, look, we want to deal with fertilizer, but we think we need a citizens group, and here's what you should do. The items that are there, and if you've got the handout, you can read them, are in our charge. These are a quote, as opposed to Saperstein just writing stuff down on a slide. We are coming here with a proposal for regulation, so that's the constructive changes. We are in the final throes of writing the best management practices plan, which is the comprehensive plan. So I marked it down as done, even though it's with a copy editor right at the moment. Should be ready for distribution in a week or two. Implementation action plan is to be interactive with you as Board of Health, and time frame and budget will come out as we go. So the first step in this presentation is proposed rulemaking. We've got a parallel path. One is to the General Court of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, our legislature, and that's for a home rule petition that would bless our activities in controlling the application of fertilizer. And let's keep saying control. It's not a ban. It's not any prohibition. It's to be an intelligent control. We're asking the state to authorize either the regulation or town bylaw, and frankly, with an awareness that there are other interests in the Commonwealth that would like to have a statewide statute for the control of application. We think the home rule petition will demonstrate our interest to the General Court. Now, home rule petitions have to be fresh by a year. 2010 is not fresh, so we're renewing our request. It'll be Article 77 at annual town meeting. The other approach was to come to you with a regulation or a proposed regulation, which would be for your consideration, and here I'm addressing the board. And our formal recommendation for adoption will come the moment the best management practices plan is edited and in a format that it could be printed and distributed. Now, excuse me, the principles are that the control will apply to professional fertilizer applicators and interested homeowners, except in keeping with state law, commercial agricultural enterprises. If you look at the 4 items that are coming down, you will see the array, you will see them explained in the array of slides to come. So there will be slides on standards of performance, education, with special roles for landscapers, and we'll have 4 or 5 slides on the best management practices plan. Standards of performance. Let's get to the nutshell. If you look up our proposal, there are lots of paragraphs in there that have to do with how it would be managed, what the definitions are. But the standards of performance are at the heart of it. We're saying no more nutrient than is needed by the plants to grow during a typical or during a Nantucket growing season. And that would be 3 pounds per 1,000 square feet of land, 3 pounds of nitrogen, no more than half a pound per application, and applications at least 2 weeks apart. Of those half-pound applications, no more than a quarter pound or 50% to be quick-release nitrogen. Phosphate, Nantucket soils are relatively rich in phosphate, and it says none unless the need is specified by a soil test. And if the soil test says for new plantings and transplantation or substantial repair that you need phosphate, fine. For the purposes of controlling fertilizer application, we have to recognize that compost is a fertilizer. And so we've spent a lot of time. The blood of my colleagues, blood and sweat of my colleagues are on the pages dealing with compost, because as we wrote, we would get material back from our reviewers giving us the latest in their research. Plants don't grow when the soil is cold. Looking up historic temperature records for Nantucket, if we go from April 15 to October 15, we tend to coincide with the time that the average temperature is above 55 degrees, which is a good temperature or a good rule for turf growth. The standards of performance say, look, Conservation Commission rules already talk about not disturbing wetlands and the 100-foot barrier. We're saying also don't put fertilizer down when the rain's going to make it all go away. And should your fertilizer fall onto impervious surfaces, sweep it up. That's driveways, roads, sidewalks, whatever. Okay. Having said these are the standards of performance that we're proposing in regulation, the reality is that we're hoping to catch your attention through education. And the education will be based on the Best Management Practices Plan. It is specific to Nantucket. If you go to the University of Massachusetts Extension site, there's a Best Management Practices Plan for turf grass. It's for the mainland. It doesn't talk about our little sand pile and its unique geology, topography, climate, and plants. That BMP will be the reference work for things that we publish and for workshops that we do with landscapers and homeowners. The first workshop, by the way, is March 13th. It's intended for landscapers. It's, as anything that we do in Nantucket, it'll be open to the public, but the invitation will go out to the landscapers. It will be held by the experts who are our referees. Synopses of the BMP sections have already been handed to the editor, Peter Brace, of the Nantucket Blue Pages, which is under preparation by our Harbor Plan Implementation Committee. And then we're going to have shorter brochures that could be a one-pager that's just handed to any customer who buys fertilizer. We're hoping the vendors will work with them. We're going to put stuff up on web pages, and it was suggested to us that why don't we have a little credit card size handout, same thing the banks give you when they give you the calendar that says the name of the bank on one side, calendar on the other side, except ours will have, one side will be very short set of rules on application. The other side will be a ruler. So if we say cut your grass to 3 inches, you could use the card. If we say water to 1 inch depth, there's something there. It's, is it a gimmick? Perhaps, but it's also a way of distributing information. Okay, we are saying that if this comes to pass, that professional landscapers should know what's in the BMP, and if they can demonstrate that to the satisfaction of the Department of Health, then they will get a license. License will be good for 3 years. There will be a fee for the license, and licenses may be renewed. We are not telling or in any way requiring a level of test because we don't know yet what would be workable within the Department of Health. So assessment, you could translate that to test, but there may be other ways of doing it. Oral exams, practice, experience, whatever. That will be up to the Department of Health. The advantage of a license is that the BMP contains much more flexibility than the strict standards of performance that we've written into the regulation. The regulation is straightforward, easy to understand, but inflexible. The BMP says, sure, there may be changes in the climate. We may have a hot, dry summer, which would take one form of application. We may have a wet summer, in which case there might be different products that you want to use and different application rates. Homeowners may seek a license but are not required to, and there are enforcement penalties that are written into the regulation. That's something else that will evolve as we get a program in place. So let's talk about best management practices. We learned from other jurisdictions. In fact, Article 68 was a translation of a regulation that was in place in Madison, Wisconsin, Dane County, Wisconsin. We discovered that it's Sanibel in Florida. I was joking on Sarasota versus Sanibel. It's Sanibel in Florida, Suffolk County in New York, all have fertilizer application regulations, as does the state of New Jersey, statewide. So we were aware of these, and the first temptation was, well, if it works there, it'll work here. The realization that it doesn't translate is what took all of our time as we tried to make sure that this was Nantucket specific. Just in case you haven't picked up on the conversation from the last hour, nitrates, nitrate contamination, nutrient contamination high in nitrate, tends to affect the biota in seawater, marine life. Phosphates, as we know from going to the supermarket and seeing that every detergent says it's a low phosphate detergent, affects freshwater life. And so here in Nantucket, where we have had postings on the ponds, don't let your dog swim here, and other kinds of postings, may be related to phosphate nutrient contamination. So, I've already said what we're proposing is give enough for the plants. If you give more than the plants need, given the rapid movement of elements and chemicals through our sandy soils, it's going to end up in the water very quickly. Special case for phosphate, we've already said, it's a little repeat, don't add phosphate unless a soil test says it's necessary. Unfortunately for those of us, and that's I, who learned that if you want to make things grow, you got a bag of moo poo and you put it down in the bottom of the hole and the tree grew like crazy. Animal manure composts are very rich in phosphate. There are composts such as leaf litter that are not as rich in phosphate. We know that composts are very valuable for amending the soil for other purposes, moisture retention, growth of bacteria and insects. There are reasons for putting it down. The BMP says do it with care. Our organic matter content of the soils, based on soil tests done previously here in Nantucket, are somewhat lower than the mainland. If you read the UMass BMP, they talk about an organic matter content of 5 to 6% as being healthy. We haven't found many much above 3.5%, and so our BMP says don't really try and raise your organic matter content much above 4. In fact, don't raise it above 4. We're saying if you're going to amend your soils, if you're going to try and grow things, get a soil test. What do you learn from the soil test? Well, one of the things you'll find out is that Nantucket soils are sandy. There's very little clay, very little silt. A loam, which is a prime agricultural soil, will be 40% clay, 40% silt, 20% sand. Our soils will be 60, 80. Am I close? I'm looking at my experts here. 60, 80% sand and the rest silt. The soil test will also tell you phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, iron, and trace elements. It'll tell you the organic matter content, and it will tell you or estimate what the nitrogen content is on the day you took the soil test. But because nitrogen is a very fluid substance, it volatilizes, it goes up into the atmosphere. It does not tell you what it is the day that you want to put your seeds down or do your fertilizing. We are suggesting that wherever possible in Nantucket, let's use the native plants. Our native plants are here because they have acculturated to the climate and to the soils. If you look out on the moors, warm season grasses, shrubs like bayberry, bearberry, blueberry, love those bees, wildflowers, and as they are on the moors, they don't require a lot of fertilizer, they don't require a lot of excess water. So we're saying let's encourage native plants, use them as buffers. Yes, lawns where lawns are appropriate, native plants where you can, or native plantings. The landscape architects doing site planning and design should consider land areas that require no fertilizer. And members of the board, that's my presentation. One of the reasons for introducing the members of our work group is in case they had comments. I suspect that they do. And let me look at people from the editorial group. We've got Shellfish and Harbor Advisory Board. We've got Garden Club, Golf Course, Landscapers, UMass, or Mass Audubon, and Land Council. We're about 2/3 here.
Any comments from the board members that are currently here?
Mark, you want to talk about compost? Talk about compost.
Comments. I'll answer any questions that may be.
All right.
Okay.
Any board questions?
I have a few.
All right. Malcolm?
As with all initiatives, education is probably the most important thing. Could you explain a little more in detail? You're going to have training courses, and who's going to give those training courses, and how often are they going to occur?
I will answer in general terms because that's part, remember the last item was schedule and budget. Mm-hmm. We know that the first workshop is already scheduled. We know that pages on fertilizer will go into the blue pages. For those not familiar, the blue pages started in Puget Sound and it said, "Save our water." Don't throw things in the water. It was talking to boat owners. Don't discharge inappropriately into the waters. It was talking to homeowners. If you live on the Sound, don't throw your grass cuttings and your fertilizer into it. It was 60 or 70 pages. There is now a Martha's Vineyard blue pages, and I believe in, Peter, is there an Orleans?
Orleans.
Orleans has done one as well. And Mashpee is working on one. So we're writing one that will be directed to Nantucket. It will be broader than fertilizer because it'll include boat owners and homeowners and so forth. Nantucket Land Council is working with the Harbor Plan Implementation Committee. We have a paid editor, Peter Brace, known to many, who's assembling that. If you looked at your best management practices plan in your packet, you'll notice that there's a synopsis for each section. Those synopses have already been handed to the editor to go into that. Now, beyond that, Carolyn Ellis represents the Nantucket Garden Club. We visualize workshops for homeowners. And then into the out years, we will be recommending to you that the Department of Health have a small, flexible and workable advisory committee who would then continue to schedule workshops.
But the March 13th workshop Who's,
right here at 9 o'clock.
and who's doing that? You were doing that.
It's the experts coming from the University of Connecticut, Dr. Morris and his group, and they will be very specific in terms of addressing professionals. But there's going to be a lot of good information because we just learn immense amounts.
And will you have information in other languages, such as Spanish, for example?
That's a good idea, and yes, we have talked about it. That's, again, into the out year. It would require translators, probably of the small one-pagers, the brochures that might, or a single page that might be handed to a customer. Yeah, one side should be in Spanish. We're aware of that.
Well, I want to talk to you. We have some other educational things we'd like to include with landscapers, so I may talk to you afterwards about that,
Of course.
if we have them all in one place.
Cormac Collier from the Nantucket Land Council.
If I could.
Sure.
I just want to clarify just an important point. As Lee alluded to in the beginning, is that we are making recommendations to the Board of Health via the Board of Selectmen. And in terms of an education component, we're the recommendation committee. And the education we are hoping is going to come through the Board of Health and an implementation committee at some point. The March 13th workshop that Lee spoke of is a workshop that Nantucket Land Council is putting on, and that we are having the experts from University of Connecticut speak to the landscaping community. We do a workshop once a year, but in terms of future education, future workshops, we really would like it to be spearheaded by the Board of Health with the BMP as basically the symbol. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Cormac.
Thank you. Are we going to be accepting this in any formal way, Richard, in terms of?
Yes, the regulations are literally going to be presented to you in regulatory form. There will be a number of, they will be published in the paper, there'll be a number of public hearings, and at that point, the board would be asked to adopt the regulations as a local Nantucket regulation. If I may, again, we are going to depend a great deal on public education. When you look at fertilizer regulations, the words greenometers and things like that come up, which simply don't exist. Again, public education is going to be the greatest tool that we have in our arsenal. I will indeed be coming to the Board of Selectmen and asking them to either select new members or choose members that are on the current board to be a 4-member advisory group to the health department as we get these regulations off the ground and as we get the training program initiated. The licensure will be done through my office. A number of things associated with this will be done through my office. I'm considering approaching the Extension Service in Barnstable to see if they will agree to a particular day each week that as we send water samples over, that we can send soil samples over and get those analyzed. So we are looking at things of that nature. It's one more purview the Board of Health will be involved in, but I think it's with a short staff, small staff, but I think it's an important one.
I would just like to compliment you on this best practice document. It's absolutely extremely well done and documented.
I appreciate that, and even more so that it was done with volunteer help, mostly on Nantucket, shaped by our reviewers. And so, remember in that first slide, or second slide, I took a moment and said, my one fear is that I wouldn't thank enough the people who helped us get to this point.
In my last comment, I was involved in another project where there were some good ideas presented and some good ideas presented here. And education follow-through is the key. And I think the town and the Board of Selectmen have to think about giving the Board of Health maybe a little tiny budget to do some things that we really need to do. Because I would hate to see this kind of drift away and not get implemented appropriately. And we will.
So would we.
Well, volunteers are terrific, and volunteers can do wonderful things. You still need a couple of dollars and cents to really make it work.
And I want to piggyback on that, Malcolm, especially from what we've heard from the estuaries and the contributing factors. You know, they're numerous, there's no doubt, but I'm with you. There's been a lot of work done on this, and you know, back when this all began, just organizing your thoughts and organizing direction and how that's translated has been just remarkable. So, any other comments, questions from the board on the best?
I'll just make one
Sure.
as I prepare to sit down. You have drafts. Richard was quite explicit. When the best management practices plan is ready to be released to the general public, that's when the clock should start on a formal request. And we're hoping to get that to you in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Don't go too far, though, because I'd like the public to also have a chance to ask questions, if you don't mind. Anyone from the, Lucinda, yes?
Lucinda Young. I was the original chair of Article 68. I just wanted to back up a little bit and explain in general what we're trying to do as Article 68 work group. We decided early on that we should come up with a way to reduce or limit fertilizer application on Nantucket by having a program that's similar to the pesticide applicator's license, where people that apply pesticides have to learn a body of education, take a test to prove they know what they're doing and they're doing it correctly. So our approach was to come up with the best management practices, which, as you know, took a lot of work. And in our discussions with Richard Ray and among the group, it made sense to have that be administered under the Board of Health. So the best management practices document, we started out with a lot of assumptions. The education that is in that document started out with us educating ourselves and learning. I learned a lot. When we sent it out for review a year ago, we had some surprises. We've had to incorporate some new information, and particularly the things about compost that we learned, that we thought. I went in with the assumption that organic fertilizers, good, synthetic is maybe bad, and but if the synthetic can be limited to certain amounts, we'd be okay, but it's just not that black and white. The document, I don't imagine any of you have read the whole thing. It would be great if you did, but there's a lot of detailed information in there that we learned, and some of it is not even out in the bigger world yet. And because of our specific conditions here, the sandy soil, the shape, the geological shape of the island, we felt that it was better to have a regulation that was based on our conditions rather than one coming down from the state that's based on soils and conditions that are very different. So I just wanted to sort of stand back and give you more of a general approach to what we're trying to do. But we are basically recommending a locally administered Board of Health, education-based fertilizer regulation. We're not trying to do it. We're recommending that Richard take over.
Thank you, Lucinda, very much. Ken, did you want to add a question, or? Sure. Sure. Sorry.
Ken Giles, Connecticut. I'm just curious on the standard of performance where we say three pounds per 1,000 square feet. I'm just wondering, is that a guess? I guess it'd have to be like a 50% reduction or a 75% reduction, or is it not that big a reduction? And the second part of my question would be, did we consider at all a ban? We just went through a process with in the prior meeting on prior subject here on putting in sewers possibly because we wanted to get the nitrogen level down to 0. And I'm wondering if that same philosophy fits into this too. So, but maybe my first question will answer that.
Thanks, Ken.
Good question.
Lee?
Yeah. The reduction issue would be lot by lot because it would depend upon previous practice versus new practice. As Richard alluded in the earlier conversation, we are trying to get the total maximum daily loading in our two harbors and our great ponds down below the numbers that have been given to us by the Estuaries Project. One of the simple things about nitrogen and nitrate is you can't tell them apart from their source. And so some of this is just going to have to be that we all pull together, feed our plants, but not the waters, and then see whether or not we get proof of the pudding in terms of bringing the nitrate levels down in the harbors. I wish, as Richard said, greenometer, nitratometer, I wish there were one. We know that for certain forms of pollutant, you can almost trace it back to the ship or the gas station or whatever, but not in the case of nitrates. So, yeah, if we all give the plants what they need, which is answering your second question, we're not talking about a ban. We're talking about an intelligent application for landscaping so that people will have the green lawns that they want, or shrubs or gardens or vegetable patches or whatever, but not letting it go into the groundwater.
Thanks, Lee. Any other questions? Yes, Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Boyce. I'm part of the fertilizer committee. I think I can just give Ken a quick answer. It's almost no reduction in what, for instance, if you followed the application instructions for the Scott's Step 4, just as a commercial product. I think they were coming out with about 3.75 pounds per 1,000 square feet over the course of a year. So it's not a huge reduction at all. So,
but if I recall, one of the things, Ken, that I remember from the early days was that many times it's misapplied, and that is owned across the board, homeowners alike. So ultimately, the education piece of this is going to be pretty important because it's about following the instructions, you know. So, and I think that's, you know, reinforcing that is really important.
That's right. And the other problem, of course, on Nantucket soils, which are phosphorus rich, is that there's plenty of phosphorus in the Step 4. And yeah. You know, people come in, you see the bags 10, 10, 10 sitting in Marine Home Center, and that's just terrible stuff, particularly for our ponds.
You know, again, to the group, but Peter, you're standing there. In the early days, too, the discussions had to do with, you know, essentially educating the distributor about what product might be available on the island, and I just hate to sort of see that go, because you're right, you know, part of it is just what you can go get, and, you know, not all of it's really well suited for the island.
We have been checking that out, and the products are there. Are they on the shelves in Nantucket? Some yes, some no, and that I'm talking about both organically based and synthetically based fertilizers that are either low or zero in phosphate. They do exist. Given the timing of our presentation, it's highly unlikely that this growing season is going to be affected by regulation. So there will be time for the vendors to change their inventory to the things that we think are appropriate. And then just as a side issue, there is a shortage of both phosphate fertilizer sources and potash fertilizer sources. So the prices are going up through the roof on that. And some of the manufacturers are telling you how green they are because they have no phosphate in the bag, but it's to keep the price down.
Thank you. Good, thanks. Any other comment? Rosemary?
Rosemary Blackare from Woodard and Curran. We have read through the draft regulations, and we commend the town and this group for putting this forward. I think our suggestion would be, there are 2 Massachusetts Estuaries reports that were done that have a lot of information on fertilizer and its nitrogen effect. And we would encourage you to add some specific information about the TMDL so that the town gets credit for that during this whole process. In the Nantucket Harbor Estuaries report and the subsequent TMDL, there's a specific, I believe, on page 20, and these again are on the website, that talks very specifically about fertilizer loading into the harbor. So I think that can help strengthen your plan and also help the town get credit for cleaning up the water.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? No? We're going to go forward then with the recommendations, and again, I thank you very, very much.
We thank you for your time.
Yeah, it's been a great experience, I'm sure, in terms of lots to learn. The next item is the Health Director's Report. Richard?
I got nothing.
Got nothing. All right, concerns from the Board of Selectmen as well?
No, we're happy to be here and found it, as you did, very helpful, and we also thank the Article 68 committee as you have, because, you know, I've been to a couple of meetings, it's a lot of work and a lot of time, so very much appreciated.
Long outlasted me, that's for sure. Any other concerns from the Board? Seeing none? All right, then, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Let's
go.
Do you need to formally adjourn?
Yes, we are adjourned. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Whitey, for the motion, and second.
He's quick.